You see the slides okay?
Yes, AI is being done to me, and good to have you with us, Andrew.
Splendid. No, thanks, Janice, and thanks for having me back. Yes, Janice, I go back quite a long time when I've moderated groups in Oslo and in the Netherlands with White & Co. Many moons ago. So we've stayed in touch. I'm in Sydney, Australia. I think Ben here, I see Ben's on the call on the list. Ben's in New Zealand, so he's probably slightly further than me. So nice to see you, Ben. And yeah, lately, as many of us have done, as I've segued into the wonderful world of AI, or the slightly perhaps overblown world of AI, or the amazing world of AI. It's different things to different people. So so there's me in Sydney. Well, there's my deck, my coffee, and local wildlife that seems to always be on a caffeine high. I've been working last year or so with a number of these organizations. The shift has been more on, personally for me, working with critical thinking, thoughtful use of AI, using judgment, how to basically own the technology rather than just always be reacting, which is the topic of today's session. Plus change management, helping leaders sort of understand how they can drive adoption of AI, but we are putting in boundaries, guardrails, and the sort of the clarity of why we're using it. So that's kind of where work has shifted. I used to work a lot more in the collaboration space, and I still do, and I would like to do more, but you know, you've got to kind of go where people are needing help, which at the moment is this technology that is kind of ubiquitous right now. So anyway, hello everyone, and if you have any questions, just pipe up, give me a shout, drop something in the chat. I'm very happy to be interrupted, so you don't hear just from me the whole time. And maybe I'll just ask a question of everyone. Maybe if you want to just put your hand up or shout or put something in the chat, but do you feel that there are times when you've used AI because you feel that you should, rather than that you feel that there was a clear and obvious reason for using it? Just put some kind of, there we go, 100% think, great. Yeah, there's any kind of symbol, whatever you can find. I'm not used to Google Meet, so I don't know what the symbols are, so feel free to put in whichever little representation you want. But yeah, and this is a very real thing in workplaces right now, is there's a lot of pressure to use AI, and this comes from a number of different angles. Firstly, within the organization, there's leadership pressure that our organization expects us to use AI, and this happens so much. I mean, pretty much all of my clients at the moment, we're operating in this kind of weird space where at the top there's a lot of pressure to really make the most of the investment, because it's expensive. It's getting more expensive with particularly Copilot, co-work coming along. So there is pressure to get something out of this investment. Then there's peer pressure, where colleagues around us seem to be using AI. So we don't want to be left behind there, and self-pressure. I don't want to fall behind. I want to make sure I am up to date with this technology. So you know, I've certainly been guilty of a number of these. It's a weird space. But then there's not just pressure inside our organizations, there's pressure outside. Our technology overlords are throwing so much technology on us, whether it is AI or whether it's just workplace tools. And I think particularly leaders are in a very tough space at the moment, where they're trying to get on and do their jobs, but they're also trying to figure out the best use of the technology, where, you know, for productivity, let's say, there's 20, 30 different apps to use, and we for AI in as well. And, you know, should we be using one form of Copilot, an agent over a chat? Should we be using co-work? You know, what is the right AI tool for us now that there's more than just that simple chat interface? And I was recently at Microsoft's AI tour, and Satcher himself emerged from his underground hollowed out volcano secret lair to basically say the message that you've just got to keep up or you'll be left behind. You know, a real pressure sell that if you don't embrace it, you'll be left behind. So it puts more pressure on us, more pressure on organizations to think, well, we've got to use this. He didn't actually mention all the extra costs coming, which is not surprising. But so, yeah, how do we navigate this space? And, you know, how do we avoid the consequences of using too much AI? So I'm going to cover briefly AI brain fry, bot sitting, and bot shitting. Some of you may have come across the bot sitting and bot shitting. That was something that was recently a recent report from Glean, and I'll dig into that in a little bit because I think this is really quite fascinating. But AI brain fry, this was last year, HBR in a blog, I think with Boston Consulting Group, defined this mental fatigue where we're perhaps juggling too many AI tools, we've got too many agents on the go. It can cause mental fog, decision exhaustion, just because we're overseeing so many different things. There's so many different outputs which also require oversight, and we need to make sure they're on track. We need to make sure they're doing the right thing. This is actually quite demanding. So this is something that's recently come up from overuse of AI. And then from the Glean report, which came out a couple of weeks ago on bot sitting, bot shitting, and the human hidden labor of AI at work, they coined the term bot sitting, which is the time, the activity we do where we're making AI usable, making it, I guess, correct, cleaning up after it, giving it the context. It's the interactions, going back into chat and kind of bringing it back on track, making sure everything's correct, checking sources, all of that. Interestingly, bot sitting actually takes longer than doing the work itself. So when we're led to believe that AI is a time saver, yes, it can be, but also it's a time sink. If we're using it well, it should be using up our time, because if we're not, if we just don't bother, bot sitting turns into what the AI Institute termed bot shitting, which is where we're shipping work that we haven't verified, we don't fully understand, or we can't confidently stand behind. And this is becoming much more of a common thing. I think the stat was, I think around 70% of workers, of employees, have admitted to bot shitting, and those are the ones that have admitted it. So what this does is it puts the onus on the person viewing the content, receiving the work that we've done, to actually check it, to verify it, to critically analyze it, because for all of us, we're just too time poor to do this properly. So there's more and more risks that overuse of AI is throwing at us. And it's, again, I don't want to necessarily imply that it's not worth bothering, because I think it is, and we'll explore that shortly. But it's just the case that we do need to invest time in it. So that's when we use AI too much. But I think there's another angle that we haven't necessarily always looked at, which is we think AI is the solution. But what is the problem? And I had a really interesting little conversation in LinkedIn with somebody who came up with this really clever AI agent they built to go between themselves and a colleague to line up a one-on-one, because they couldn't come up with the time in their diaries to have a one-on-one chat. And so they built this bot that would organize this for them on a regular basis and so on. But then the question is like, well, do we need AI to do this? Couldn't you just pick up the phone and call this person, and if they can't talk to you, they call you back? Now, maybe I'm a little bit of a sort of old-fashioned thinker with these things, but sometimes we are overthinking the solution, and sometimes the problem isn't something that's actually that sophisticated. It's a simple problem. We have too many meetings. There's other things that are causing us to reach for AI. I mean, on the meetings front, I am old enough that I had meetings in the 1990s, and back then it was kind of simple. We required we invited the required people. There was a one-page agenda. We'd have a conversation, and the outcomes and decisions would be fairly clear. They would be decided, agreed in the meeting, and people would walk away generally with a good idea of what needed to be done next. Today, it's a little different, and it's just that we've added so much to it. We tend to invite everyone for a start. We have email conversations, we might have meeting notes, we might have the agenda written by AI because of so many inputs. We have channel and chat messages before, maybe multiple attempts to rearrange the time. Then we've got remote participants, which is a good thing. A lot of this is actually really helpful, but we're adding in more layers. Maybe we might be using whiteboard or loop in the meeting. Then we have connection issues where people drop off. There might be missed offline conversations where perhaps somebody is not in the room, and they miss those kind of special conversations that the people in the room have, where the real issues get resolved. Then there's meeting chat, and then after the meeting chat continues. We've got action items captured maybe in notes, agenda, whiteboard, like in the transcript. Then we're getting tasks assigned by someone else. So this is when we need to call for AI, because it's a bloody mess. But again, there's not necessarily an AI issue. The issue is, we have overcomplicated modern work a lot, and it's another reason why we feel that we are so far behind, because we're having to deal with all these issues, we're having to deal with all these tools, and sometimes we just need to cut through this and really simplify the problem. And then lastly on this, it's looking at our focus. We often get our focus wrong around using AI, where we hear a lot about transformation that costs jobs at one end, which very, it's a very kind of scary, large scale transformation, but that doesn't really involve us. We're not building that ourselves. We tend to focus on the left, the quick wins, the things that save minutes, but maybe sometimes take longer to get right, like meeting notes, like improving our emails and so on. But in the middle, there's a big space. There is a lot of opportunity where we can actually start to take a bit of control over processes, over activities. It's what I kind of think is the messy middle. It's where we have our team workflows or our customer interactions, our onboarding process, the things that we tend to do on a day-to-day basis in our teams. So I think this is a really good area to focus on, because it's within our control, it's within our domain. It's something that leaders, managers, senior people, even just employees in a team, we can actually have a little bit of ownership of what we're doing, because we're focusing on something we're working on, rather than what Microsoft is telling us, or what our finance director, our IT director is telling us. So firstly, with this, make it safe is a really, really crucial area, because we're trying to make it accessible, but we're also trying to make it work. We're trying to make it appropriate. We're trying to make it clear while we're using AI. So I think a thing that really helps is, rather than having detailed policies, is just creating a bit of clarity around how we can use AI and start to classify as a team, as a group, as a department. This doesn't have to come from enterprise, but just some simple traffic lights around different areas, different uses of AI, and then how do we use it? So for example, what's low risk? What do we do that doesn't need oversight, that we can just let AI go for it? And this could be meeting notes, our own meeting notes, first drafts, some personal brainstorming, low risk things. And we can chat, we can agree these as a team. We can actually say, these are the things we would like to classify as low risk, that we don't need to perhaps have too much oversight. Then what's medium risk? What are the areas where perhaps we need to check the outputs carefully? So these could be final outputs, these could be recommendations, this could be where we don't really trust the sources. This is where we can start to agree what needs oversight. And then lastly, the high risk areas. Where do we need to get approval, such as confidential matters, using personal client data, final decisions, or generating content that may deceive. And this is the sort of thing that we don't have to wait for our IT managers to tell us how to do this. We can define these ourselves based on what we do, what we commonly do, and maybe what steerage we might need. Secondly, we need to start mapping our work. So it's not about prompts. I think prompts are helpful to help understand what other people have done, but really it's about our stories. It's about what's the work we actually do. So for example, what are the things on a regular basis cause us some problems? What is a nightmare when, for example, something happens? What sources of friction are there? What makes it slow, unclear, and risky? And what would done well look like? And these things happen in most workflows. You could think of an example: onboarding. When does it happen? When somebody new joins the team. What makes it unclear? Is it the lack of time that the person spends with us? Is it the lack of clarity? Is it the lack of team norms? And then what would good look like? What would a good onboarding experience look like for somebody? And then we can start to look at what is the role of AI here? What are the tasks that we can start to apply there? This is just an example, but it's just really breaking it down into a workflow that we regularly do, rather than trying to reach for the Copilot button. So a few examples that workflows that feel more painful than they should be. For example, could be reporting, could be the triage of inbound work, could be onboarding new team members, it could be aligning objectives. You know, these are all common things that perhaps as a team cause us quite a bit of friction. I think probably most importantly is make it social. AI it's a very individual thing. The tools are designed really for us to use it on our own. We sit there with Copilot, with whatever we're using, with Claude, and it's us and Claude, and we are just, we're using it as an advisor, as an assistant, and we treat it that way. And so it's a one-to-one interaction. So, helpful to some extent, but it's not going to get us that far. And we can also waste a lot of time just going back and forth, because the way these tools are designed, they want us to like them. The technology companies want us to rely on them. So they're done in a way where we like that interaction. They are deliberately very pleasant to us. So it's really talking about work. It's having rituals with our colleagues that we can start to understand the higher value of AI, such as having 30-minute transformation sessions, discuss what isn't working as much as what does. Don't share prompts, share the story. What is it we're working on? Even if we're not specifically trying to find something to fix, talking about what we're actually doing, talking about our day-to-day frustrations is really, really helpful. And then lastly, embrace our skeptics. Now, this I put in just recently because I've done a load of change management workshops, and we're looking at the different personas and how we can help people come on board when we are adopting AI. And actually our skeptics are probably our most powerful resource, because they're the ones that will tend to not to trust AI. They don't trust what they're seeing. They're great people to critically look at it. They are the people that can actually help us to really shape what we're trying to achieve. So as much as they probably don't want to use it, they're probably the most powerful people to use. And it's bringing these people in. So rather than just sort of leaving them be and focusing on the people that do want to talk about AI, skeptics I think can be really valuable. And there's other ways we can use, like tools like Copilot. There are ways to bring people into a Copilot chat. It's not obvious, but you can actually invite other people into that conversation, and things like that I think can really help. And then next, it's setting norms. So rather than relying on assumptions, we need to create a little bit create some certainty around what we're doing, because there is so much uncertainty. I feel that we are often reacting to AI. We're reacting to the technology, the updates, the new versions, the new releases, and what does this mean to us? It's really hard to actually figure that out. And to be honest, a lot of it we don't need to worry so much about it, because we are still kind of reacting to what's happening, whereas we can actually start to create some norms that can give us a sense of ownership, a sense of control over what we're doing. Example is just agreeing as a team a few ways of working, that how often do we meet to talk about how the work is really going, that we agree our guardrails, what should be reviewed, what is okay. When we don't know, where do we go? Where do we share our stories? And maybe some areas where we don't use AI. So we're just starting to create a little bit of certainty around us to give us a bit more confidence, but also a loose framework to actually collaborate around using the technology. And then lastly, this is, I'm trying to keep this sort of fairly simple so we can have a little chat afterwards, but really just to get started, simple as holding a what sucks session, talking about something we already do every week, not a pilot, but something that is just frustrating. Let me rate it: green, yellow, red, what AI can own, what assists, what stays human. And lastly, empower your team to meet and improve it. As a leader, you can join, or you can empower your team to get on and improve what was agreed, as long as the learnings are shared as they go. And there are the norms defined as to who does what, and where who is the person responsible for maybe approving any final outputs. But it's a case of just collaboratively deciding what you're doing and then empowering the team to own it. Because I'm seeing more and more around, less about the human in the loop and more about the human in the lead. And I think the human in the loop is it's not a great term, because it suggests that we're lower down in the ladder. We are there to be informed rather than to actually own, design, and produce outputs. And that's where we've sort of held back. We feel that we're maybe not so important, that we are, we're second rate compared to the technology. And it's really a case of shifting that and just starting to own the problem, not the outputs, and go from there. So they're really very simply, it's rather than sit back and have AI done to us, it's AI being done with us. It's really having the conversations, and how that's done, it doesn't matter so much. It's just opening it up to be more of a collaborative approach, doing it with your colleagues, opening up, sharing what you're working on. I think sharing prompts is a start, but really it's sharing the stories, sharing the work we're doing. And that's more and more the work I'm doing is around how we can actually apply judgment, critical thinking, and collaboration skills to build AI solutions collectively. That's really the gist of it. I hope that was of some use, but I am certainly hanging around for questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Really good. We still have 5 minutes for questions, answers. I see here in Google, you can also ask them live, but I think it's better to ask Andrew. Before asking him anything, let's have a brief look in the chat, because I think there was a few good things in there. Perhaps we can start with you, Larry, on the cognitive surrender, and then we can hand it over to you, Shannon, afterwards. Larry, would you mind telling us a little bit more about the surrender?
Yeah, I can't find the paper, but there's, and I'm just reading constantly these days. I can dig it out if folks are curious. But there was this, it was a paper about how human cognition and computer cognition differ, but also more to the point, and I think this has a lot to do with the design of these systems, that like what you're talking about, doing it teaming with humans rather than just with AI. Then you just played right into their hands, basically. But the physiological point of that was that there's a dynamic in the way these interactions are designed, that, or maybe not the way they're designed, but just the way LLMs work, that there's this notion of cognitive surrender that you get lulled into, because they're right, depending on the application, 75 to 99% of the time. And so you get lulled into that both the false sense of security and just not laziness, but just sort of inertia, that it's right often enough that you just sort of surrender to its thing. Again, if people are curious, I can dig out the paper.
That's a great, I love it when you say surrender. That's such the apt term, isn't it? You're kind of just surrendering to the process.
Yeah.
Yes, Larry, do share the paper when you find a chance, and I will put it into the blog post.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Yeah. And then I'll hand it over to you, Shannon.
Thanks. This is very, very relevant topic for me. I actually was penalized a bit in my performance review because I wasn't using AI enough.
Wow.
Yeah. And for me, what's difficult is recognizing where I would use it, because people are like, oh, well, take the tedious tasks. I'm like, I don't have tedious tasks. Like I have very interesting projects that I have to work on, and I have a really hard time recognizing, oh, I could try to use AI for this. And I think your point about making it social, about talking with the other teammates and other colleagues about where they're using it, could help with that, because I seem to have a hard time recognizing it myself. But if I'm hearing from others where they're using it, that might help stir some ideas. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. I mean, like, a lot of people want to hear the answers. Like, where should I use it? What's the best application for me? And I can't tell you, because I don't know your work. But talking to your colleagues who maybe understand a bit better about more broadly what you're working on can be really, really helpful. I think it's hard, because sometimes we don't want to put our hand up and say, I'm struggling with this. But then if you're making it a safer space just to talk generally about work, the opportunities tend to come up. It's like innovation. If you're trying to ask people for good ideas, it's really hard. But if you're talking about what you're working on, what the problems are, what are the touch points, the sort of the areas where we interact with other people and what slows them down, and suddenly you start to think, oh yeah, there's something we can do there. And it's but just putting pressure on people individually is very counterproductive.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that's quite something having it in your as a I can't remember what you said exactly, but in your work, performance. Yes, yeah, it's.
But I
That's the
will
first
say
time I've
also,
coming up
Shannon,
with
you're not the only one. I've heard this also in other group meetings, and sadly, also in Denmark, even where an organization in same line of work like Casper in financial services, banking, were basically told by the higher ups that we give you the equivalent of $2,000 tokens per month, and we expect you to use it. And if you don't use it, we will have a meeting on the topic of growth with you. And I thought that's like a Silicon Valley meme, right? That doesn't really happen. It's like the equivalent of whatever, buying a Massey Ferguson tractor and expecting people to just empty the diesel tank every day just because you can. All right, we're running out of time. So Larry, you get probably the second to last word, perhaps.
I'm just curious if anybody's heard the disconnect between these executive expectations and the actual academic data and research that's coming out around AI productivity. It's like, I just read a paper yesterday that showed at best in the next couple of years, a 1.4% increase in productivity. And I forget, there was another, but it's just remarkable to me, the delta between what the data says and what we experience day to day and the expectations from the C-suite. And I'm just curious if anybody has any thoughts on that.
I think that's.
Do you want to comment, Andrew?
Yeah, there's a huge mismatch, isn't there? I mean, like, honestly, there is value. There are very high value use cases of AI, but individually, it's almost impossible to realize. It's low value stuff, which I tend to find takes a lot longer than the reward you get for it. The outputs aren't really worth the effort, so it puts people off. So how do you actually then get people together to create higher value outputs? And I don't think there's really that strategic focus on that. It's kind of just, here it is, use it because it's amazing, and there's not a lot beyond that.
Yeah,
I think that's all we had. Thank you very much to everybody who participated actively, everybody who joined from around the world. Truly international call. Good to do this in the morning also. Sad that I think many in our North American cohort couldn't make it, but hey, for the next time and also for the recording. Good to see you, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
No, a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.